You know how there are things that you just keep doing, even though you know better? And nothing has happened bad yet from what you keep doing. But let me tell you, your luck will run out. And when it does, it involves a baby gate and a broken arm. Welcome to Master of CheMOMstry, where motherhood and science collide. In today's video, I'm going to tell you about the time that I stepped over a baby gate and broke my arm and connect it to the science of bone fractures and how they heal. My name is Joy. I'm a mom and a teacher, and my passion is to share my experiences and stories about my life and connect them to concepts in biology and chemistry. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to like it and also subscribe if you would like to see more content like this. So here's the story. My son was 9 months old and he had just went from crawling to transitioning into cruising around furniture. So using furniture and walking around it. And we installed a pressure gate to separate the living room where we spent the majority of our time from the kitchen. And the main reason for that pressure gate was because I was afraid I was going to leave the bathroom door open or the kitchen door open when I happened to lay down on the couch or on the floor, because I was always in such a state of exhaustion because my son never slept ever. It felt like maybe like an hour at a time. Then he was in my bed and then he was hungry and then he was crying. Anyway, I was afraid that he was going to get into the laundry room or bathroom because I would forget to shut the door. So we just left the pressure gate there and then we would step over it. I was trying to get better at cleaning up, not to be a perfect housewife, but to get beyond the category of slob. And I decided to go and pick up all of the half full glasses of water that were all over. For some reason, we must have had an obsession with drinking water and just leaving part of it there. And if you want to know more about a mistake I made about a glass of what I thought was water and what I drank instead, check out my other videos. But anyway, I had them in my hands and I actually had them like in the crooks of my arms as well. And then I stepped over the baby gate. Well, my back foot, as it was crossing the baby gate, caught, and when I went down, I came down on my right elbow. The elbow hit the floor first. So then as the rest of me heaped down, I realized there was a pretty strong, angry pain in my elbow that was spreading and tingling every time that I tried to move my arm. Now at that point, I looked at my arm. Nothing was sticking out. There was no misshapen indication of anything crazy, but from what I could tell, that pain was not going to go away. It wasn't just something that, hung around for, a few minutes and then it dissipated. It was there, and every time I moved, it made me cry and it hurt a lot. So I called my husband, who happened to be a couple hours away that day, great, and he couldn't come and help me at that point. I knew I needed to get to the clinic, not the ER, because it wasn't like, I didn't have bones sticking out of the skin, but I did need to get help because something was very wrong. I could not load my child into a car seat in my car, let alone drive. I knew that for sure. So my husband called his coworker, and she was able to come after about an hour to come and get me. I also called my father, who was able to come, and he came and watched my son, and he was about an hour away. So they both came about the same time. My dad stayed with my son. And then my husband's coworker brought me to the clinic. And let me tell you, that x-ray positioning of the arm, that was rough. I may have screamed, but like tried to hold down the scream. It hurt. It hurt a lot. So when it was all said and done, what ended up happening? Well, I ended up having what's called a radial head impacted fracture. And here is where motherhood and science collide. There are two major categories of fractures: open fractures and closed fractures. Open fractures are also known as compound fractures. That's when the bone will breach, meaning go outside of the skin. A closed fracture, also known as a simple fracture, is when the bone stays inside of the skin. A radial head impacted fracture is a closed fracture or simple fracture. What does radial and head refer to? Well, when we're talking about our limbs, our upper limbs have three parts. We have the arm, that has the humerus bone. The forearm has the ulna, which is on the pinky side, and the radius is on the thumb side. And then the third part is your hand, which consists of your wrist bones, known as carpals, the hand bones that are metacarpals, and then your digits or fingers are made up of bones called phalanges. So I ended up breaking my radius bone, which is the bone that's on the thumb side, like I mentioned before. And so what is head refer to? Okay, well, on the radius bone, there are two ends. There's the end that interacts with your wrist bones. That's the styloid process. And then there's an end that interacts with your elbow joint, and that's called the radial head. What is an impacted fracture? Now, there are a lot of different types of fractures depending on the type of break and the location. And so what I'm going to give you is not a comprehensive list. I'm just going to give you a few examples. The first fracture is called a green stick fracture. It's literally referring to a green stick, a stick that is green, like a stick that is still attached to the bush or tree that is growing on. That if you tried to break it open, that there would still be green inside. And as you're trying to break it open, it doesn't snap easily. It has a lot of fibers that are still holding it in place, and you can't get it to break without a lot of force. So a green stick fracture, in terms of your bones, is referring usually to children, because children's bones have a lot more of something called hyaline cartilage in it. Hyaline cartilage gets replaced by hard, compact bone as one matures. And so because this hyaline cartilage is a lot more flexible, when a child breaks a bone, it likely will not break all the way through. And because it doesn't break all the way through the bone, it gets referred to as a green stick fracture. A compression fracture is a fracture that a lot of older folks that have a lot more age on them will run into more often. This is when the bone gets crushed. It can happen in your vertebrae, which are the bones that make up your spine. And so if an older person sits down too hard or might get too much of a hug, too much of a squeeze, sometimes that bone, because it's not as healthy, because maybe the person's diet isn't very good, because there's a lot of things that happens with aging in terms of hormones that change, that affect bone structure and strength, that bone can go from its normal structure and get smushed down. And finally, let's get to my type of fracture, the impacted fracture. An impacted fracture is referring to an impact. So an impact happened. That could be a bone runs into another bone of the body, or the bone runs into something that's hard or doesn't move. And so that's what ended up happening to me, where my elbow ran into the floor and impacted it, and it caused a crack in the bone across the bone, so in a horizontal line from left to right. And just for fun, here's a picture of my son's broken maxilla, cheekbone, and lower orbit from when he got hit in the face with a line drive baseball. Another question you might ask is, why does it hurt when a bone breaks? No matter whether it's a little crack in the bone like mine or something that's more detrimental. So bone is a living tissue. It has cells inside of it. And the cells have a special job that they do. There's a variety of cells, and they're going to be laying down material that surrounds them. That's the hard stuff that you see. And that hard stuff is called a matrix. And that matrix is made up of proteins and fibers and elements like calcium and phosphorus, things that you get from your diet. And so the living bone is going to be regenerating and can die, and can also, when it's alive, can reproduce and make more of itself. This living bone also is going to be surrounding and making spaces for blood vessels and for nerves. So that when you break the bone, if you are damaging the nerves that are running through that bone, and nerves are there to like sense things and tell you about your environment, if it breaks, you're going to get pain because it's telling you something's wrong. When bone breaks, then what happens to it? How do we get it from being broken to being healed? There are 4 major steps for healing bone. The first step is when you have the initial break, that the blood vessels that are within that bone that I was talking about, that they're part of your bone structure, they're going to also get broken. And so there's going to be blood flowing and bulging into that area where the break happened. And as it flows and builds up, it's called a hematoma. And then there's going to be emergency cells that are going to be coming to determine what do we need to do about this problem that just happened. The second step is a fibrocartilage callus is going to form. So let me explain what that is. You're going to have special cells that are going to come to the area that are called fibroblasts. And fibro means fiber, so they're going to be laying down special fibers that are going to be a special type of cartilage, fibrocartilage, that's going to fill in that space where the break happened. fill in that space where the blood spilled out and caused a bulge in that area. And so there's a reason why you have a sling, or you get a cast, or you're immobilized in some way after a break, so that it gives time for that fibrocartilage callus to form and to get on to the next step. And if you move that bone too roughly or have too much force, it could break it, and then it would have to start all over again, or as it starts all over again, it is in the wrong shape than what it should be, and then you might have a misshapen bone at the end of the healing process. So it's not really very strong, but it's kind of just temporary, this fibrocartilage callus. The third step is that there's going to be a special type of bone called spongy bone that's going to start filling in and replacing that fibrocartilage callus. And that spongy bone is going to be a little bit harder. And it's called spongy bone because it kind of looks like a sponge. There's little holes within it. And so that's going to fill in that space. The final step is something called bone remodeling. And this is a way to get your bone back to how it was before. There's a special type of bone called compact bone. This is the type of bone that you are used to looking at when you think about a model of a bone. And what has to happen is that that space where the spongy bone was at, that was filling in the break, compact bone needs to be built on the outside of that, and then on the inside, a medullary cavity, also known as the marrow cavity, needs to be drilled out. So there are cells that are in charge of recycling that spongy bone in order to get that medullary cavity back in place, and then there are cells that are in charge of adding that compact bone. So this bone remodeling process happens in you every day, and it happens in people who are going through physical therapy and are able to start doing things with that area, their arm, their leg, or whatever was broken, so that they can strengthen that bone, because the more you put stress on bones, the more they remodel, the more they actively will break down material on the inside, add more material on the outside. And so that is a good thing to do, to exercise, to put stress on your bones, because it will overall keep your bones healthier. So back to my story, what did I have to do because of the impacted fracture that I had on the radial head of my radius bone? Well, I had to wear a sling for about 6 weeks. No surgery was required. Wearing a sling and keeping it immobilized so that it could go through the healing process was rough, because a 9-month-old is a lot of work. They're pretty dangerous. They're getting into things. They're fast. They want to do everything themselves. I got through it, but it was a little bit trying. I also did have some pain a few years after that in that elbow joint when I would be doing things, but it did subside eventually. What did I learn? Well, don't step over baby gates with stuff in your hands. That's kind of a bad idea. And maybe just don't step over baby gates at all. We ended up keeping the baby gates because we're cheap and we bought them. At that point, we were just starting out, and financially, if we bought something, thought probably we should keep it. So we've taken it with us on 4 moves since that time. But we did buy metal gates that swung out, that were attached to walls or to stairwells. But I hate to tell you this, it's been about 10 years since that happened. And here I am using a pressure gate again and stepping over it every morning to get my toddler out of her room. So don't be surprised if there's another follow-up video of how I broke another body part because I was using this stupid pressure gate again. I just can't give it up. So let's wrap this up. As a mom, a person, I love to share my wisdom. And so here are 3 things to take away from this video. Number 1, a radial head impacted fracture is referring to a bone in your forearm called the radius, which is on the thumb side of your arm. At the top of the bone is something called the head of the radius. When you break it at that location, then you get a radial head impacted fracture. Impacted fractures are when you have bones that are forced against another bone or forced against something else and will cause a break, a crack in that bone. Number 2, bone breaks can heal and get your bones back to normal because there are living cells within your bone. The living cells make more of themselves. The living cells can lay down material called matrix, which is what makes bones hard. There are 4 steps to healing a bone. Number 1 is a hematoma forms. Number 2, a fibrocartilage callus replaces that area. Number 3, spongy bone replaces the fibrocartilage callus. And number 4, your bone goes through a special process called bone remodeling, where you get your ratios of compact bone and spongy bone back to what it was like before. The reason that you're given a sling to wear or a cast or a boot or some other form of immobilization for that broken area of your body is to allow for these steps to occur so that you don't end up with a misshapen bone. Number 3, even though I don't think I've completely learned my lesson, I would highly recommend not using pressure gates, definitely not stepping over them. If you're going to use them, take them down each time instead of actually physically putting your body into risk of possible impacted fractures. And I know that a lot of folks are worried about their walls and their woodwork when you install one of those swinging gates, but you guys, pretty sure it's going to be cheaper to repaint a wall and, putty a couple of nail holes and have to pay for an ER visit and to have the pain of a broken bone and have to wait for the time for that bone to heal. Do you have a baby gate story or a broken bone story that you want to share? Please leave in the comments. I'd love to hear it. If you have any questions about the biology, chemistry, or the science that I shared, please let me know. If you got a kick out of this video, please like it as well as subscribe to my channel if you're interested in more content like this. Our experiences can teach us so much, and I love sharing them with you.